Hey everyone, welcome to Our Small Footprint, another early morning intro video because I just can't seem to get into a routine of having these done the night before. But this is yesterday's video, so this is Thursday's video, and we have processed all the pork ready to be made into sausages on Friday, so I will share that as well once we make it into sausages. And we made some lard tortillas. I'm not sure what else, but I have shared it and it's all following this, so please enjoy, and I will see you again in the next day or so when we make up those sausages. So we have to mince all the mince and put it on the sausage casings, and we still have apples. So I still need to do apples, but I will share it all with you as I do it. So enjoy, and I will see you again tomorrow. Thanks everyone for watching. So it hit that point of the month now where I have to deal with this pork. So the pork is vacuum sealed when I buy it, and it has a quite extensive best before date on it, which is really helpful because it means that I can stash it in the back of the fridge where it's nice and cold, and I don't have to get to it as quickly as some of the other meats. So today was the day to deal with the rest of the pork. So first up, I decided to pull some of it. I do a Kahlua pork. It's nice in the slow cooker, but the slow cooker uses a lot of power, so I've been trying it in the pressure cooker lately and it's been working really well. Today didn't work as well as I would have liked because I got a phone call just as I put it in, and walked away for 25 minutes unfortunately, but it still worked. So what I do is I lay bacon in the bottom of the pan, and then I cook that off a little bit to get a bit of moisture and fat in the bottom of the pan. I slice the pork into large chunks. This one was, 2 or 3 kilos worth of meat, and I cut it into 3 big chunks. And then I pierce the skin and put garlic cloves inside the pork pieces, and I sprinkle them all with salt. And then I place them in on top of the bacon in the pan, and then add half a cup of water. Now because I walked away, I didn't add the water and someone put the lid on it, so we had a little bit of burning on the very bottom, and the meat's not as moist as I would like, but it's still plenty usable for what we had, and I'll show it to you later once it's done. But that's how I do it. So then I end up with this fairly basic salty garlic flavored pulled pork that I can then season with whatever I want. So I've got that apple barbecue sauce, or I can use just some mayo or whatever I want with it, and it tastes really nice. After that, I cut up the rest of the pork. So what I'm going to do with the rest of the pork is make sausages. So I just need it cut into pieces that are appropriately sized to go through the mincer on the KitchenAid. So it's sort of long, narrow pieces or small chunks, and I just go through and cut the whole lot up and put that into bowls so that I can marinate it as I want. So the little bits of stringy fat will get caught in the mincer, so sometimes I pull them out while I'm doing it. Other times I'm just aware of it when I'm feeding it through the mincer, but we just sort of cut and dice up the pork and put it into bowls to start with. Then I seasoned them. So I decided to go with 3 different sausage varieties this particular time. I play around with flavors each time I make them, and I'm not very good at keeping notes, so my sausages are rarely the same twice, which Daryl always likes. Actually, he much prefers the fact that my meals always taste different rather than eating the same thing over and over again. But the first lot I did one of my basic sort of a flavorings, so I added salt. Now salt has to be added, well, there is a ratio of salt to sausages, but that's more for the sausages being kept. We don't keep the sausages, we make them, cure them, freeze them, so it doesn't really matter about the ratio of salt, to be honest. But you want at a very minimum 10 grams per kilo of fine salt into the mince. So we put 20 grams of salt per 2 kilos. I also added some minced garlic into the mix because we really like garlic. Sometimes I use wet garlic, sometimes I use dried. I added some of the homemade whole grain mustard. We really like the flavour profile that the mustard adds to the meat, but it also adds moisture. And then these ones I added a whole bunch of Worcestershire sauce. I really like Worcestershire sauce in my sausages. I would normally add some ground pepper, but I have run out of peppercorns. They're on their way in delivery at the moment. I also added some dried mushroom powder. So I have these dried mushrooms that I got from Costco, and I just stick them in my little Tri-Best blender cup, and then I grind them up into a powder and I add them to the sausages. They will rehydrate in the fridge overnight while the meat is marinating. So I do that to add the mushroom flavour, and then it all has to be mixed really well. So you just want to make sure that the moisture that's dripped to the bottom is being rotated through the meat, and that all the seasoning is covering as much of the meat as possible, and that sort of thing, because when you're going to put it through the grinder, all that seasoning is going to be covering the meat, and then it goes into the fridge overnight. The second batch I did salt as the other one was. I used a jar of my caramelized onion jam. So sometimes I can caramelized onion on its own, and sometimes I make the jam. I didn't have any on its own this time, but that's fine. The caramelized onion jam works just as well. And I decided, because I have all these apples at the moment, I would put apple in them. So I just diced the apple up into small pieces, because I'm going to run that through the grinder with everything else. So it didn't really matter what sort of sizing it was, because it's going to run through the grinder and then be emulsified into the sausage meat anyway. So I diced up 2 apples and placed them in the bowl with that as well. I then had a bit of a think about what other flavours I would like to put with this particular sausage, and thought maybe a breakfast-ish sort of a sausage would be nice. So I added some maple syrup to add some moisture in there, and I broke up the rest of that bag of bacon that I'd used for the Kahlua pork. So the bacon that we buy is like an economy bacon, and it's all sort of mixed pieces. It's not rashers as such. It's sort of offcuts and pieces like that. So I just went through and pulled the rind off a whole bunch of sections of it, that whatever had meat on it and fat on it, and then broke that up and mixed that through, because that's going to go through the mincer as well. So it doesn't have to be particularly small or cut up or anything else. And then I added some of the mustard as well. I add the mustard to most things because, as I said, it adds moisture and it adds a different flavour profile. It gives it a little bit of acidity. So I added some of the mustard and then mixed that one up as well, to coat all the meat in the marinade ingredients, and then that one went in the fridge as well. The third batch I decided to do sort of a honey mustard, but I, varied as I got along. So I have my garlic fermented in honey in the fridge at the moment, and I've got a whole bunch of garlic cloves that were sitting on top, because I like to use the honey for things, and some of the honey is crystallizing in the bottom. So I decided to use a whole bunch of those cloves from the top into the mix. Again, they'll be minced through, so I just put them in whole, and then poured a little bit of the honey in as well. And then I added the homemade mustard, as I did with all the other stuff, and then I added a drizzle of our cowboy candy brine. So the cowboy candy brine is slightly sweet, got a bit of heat to it, and it's sort of acidic. It's nice flavour profile to add in there as well. Then I decided to add some dried sage as well, because I thought that it just needed a boost of flavour, and I really like the flavour of sage in pork sausages. Sage honey mustard sounds a bit like a bit like a breakfast sausage for me too, because breakfast sausage normally has that sage and the maple and things like that. So I added a whole bunch of dried sage, and then again just mixed it, blended it well, made sure that everything was combined, and stuck that one in the fridge for tomorrow too. These will be in the fridge overnight, and then I will mince them tomorrow and then fill the sausage casings tomorrow, so I'll put that in tomorrow's video. Then for dinner tonight, my lard tortillas had been requested. So these are like an authentic style tortilla made with lard. And I based this recipe off one on Views from the Road here on YouTube. They make some lovely food there, and there's some birria tacos that I'm going to try making from them as well when I get my quarter of a cow. So I put 3.5 cups of plain flour, 155 grams of lard and 10 grams of salt into the bowl first. Then you want to blend the flour with the lard so that it looks a bit like a pastry, like it has the little knobs of fat in the flour, and then add the rest of the flour and get that blended as well so that it's like pastry. You're cutting the fat into the flour to start with, and once it's sort of at the right point, you can squeeze it and it holds together a little bit like kinetic sand. Like you hold it together, but then when you press it, it all sort of falls apart as well. So you get it to that point. And you want to add warm water to the dough. So you want the water to be warm, not hot, just warm. And I add 2 cups to start, and I squeeze it all together. So I just sort of use a squeezing motion to help hydrate all that flour, to get the moisture through, the fat through the flour and that sort of thing. You need to do it for quite a while. It's a bit of an intensive one, and you can do it in the KitchenAid, but I found that this step is better done by hand, but it really does depend on my hands and shoulders for the day as to whether I'm capable of it. This took quite a while today. I've cut out a bunch of it because there was some pain issues with this one. But so then after you've squeezed it together, you can add up to 3/4 of a cup of more water. So I added 1/2 cup to start with, and then kept on going. You want to make sure that all the flour is hydrated, so I ended up adding a little bit more in the end as well to get the little bit of flour that was left. It's a really shaggy, sticky sort of a dough, but that's how you want it. So then I put it aside to rest while I was doing some other stuff, and just left it to rest for a little bit. I pulled the pork out of the pressure cooker to pull it, and as you can see, it's a little bit dry. It pulls apart. It's tasty enough. It's just going to need a little bit of sauce, and it works really well. The flavor profile is really nice with that bit of bacon and the garlic and stuff in it as well. It just works really well this way, and I am sad that I walked away and someone else helped. Once the dough has rested and I had room on the bench, I knead it. So you can knead it by hand or with the KitchenAid, and you just want to get it to a really soft, silky dough. So you just want to keep on moving it, use the heel of your hand and push it against itself, fold it over and keep on pushing, and you want to get it so that it's got a really nice, smooth texture to it, because this is a tortilla. You're going to want to roll it out really nice and thin, so you need it to stretch rather than break. So you're trying to get that consistency of a really smooth, stretchy dough to be able to roll it out into those tortillas. Once the dough is kneaded to your liking, put it aside again for a little bit, and just let it rest for 15 minutes. Then when you come back to it, you're going to divide it up into balls. Now my balls are about 50 to 60 grams each. I didn't take too much effort with getting them exact, so I just broke the balls off and weighed them, and so long as they were between the 50 and the 60 gram mark, then I put them aside. It didn't really worry me too much for this kind of a thing. I always know that there's plenty of dough to make enough for everyone, so I don't have to be pedantic about the size of the balls to make sure that there's enough. Then I topped the chunks that I had broken off with a little bit of lard. You need to keep on adding a bit of fat to these because they will get really sticky otherwise. The more you handle them, the more sticky they get. So I added a little bit more lard to the balls before rolling them. After that, I rolled each of the pieces into balls to rest again. So I just use the palm of my hand and the board and do a circular motion to turn them into little balls, much the same as I do with bread rolls or anything like that, and just did all of them into these neat little balls, and then put them on the silicone mat all bunched up together to rest again. So I put a little bit more lard over the tops of the balls so that I could put the dough mat over the top of them and they wouldn't stick to the dough mat or dry out or create a skin or anything, because you don't want them to create a skin, because that will crack when you're trying to roll them out instead of being nice and flexible. So a little bit more lard there. You could spray them with oil or something if that was your preference, but we're using lard here because that's how these ones are done. Once I'm ready to roll them out, I dip the balls into flour very generously. So you want to have a little bowl of flour and you want to dip them into the flour really generously, and then you want to roll them out. So first of all, I've shown this before, if you're trying to roll something out round, it's a good idea to thin out the very edges of the tortilla with the heel of your hand, because when you're rolling things, the edges tend to end up thick. So if you pinch the edges of the dough to create a thinness around the edge before you roll them out, it's going to help you get a more even round. And then when you roll it, you want to roll it from the center out. So you use the rolling pin to roll from the center away from you and towards you and spin, and away from you and towards you and spin, and that's going to help you get more consistency with the thickness of your tortillas as well. We cook them off on the cast iron plate, and they take very little time. So I have 2 cast iron plates going, and I just roll and place and roll and place and flip and take off, and like, it's just a bit of a production. They're very quick to cook, very easy to cook. You want your pan not too hot because they will burn, because they cook so quickly. So we cooked them all off in the cast iron, and once they're cooked, we put them inside tea towels to stay warm and soft. So you just put them in a pile inside the tea towel to stay nice and warm and moist until you're ready to serve them. I made mayo as usual for us because we had these for dinner. So I used my normal mayo recipe, 3 duck egg yolks. I used some mustard, I think, and some lemon juice, a bit of salt, garlic cloves, I think, the fermented garlic honey cloves in this particular batch. There's a variety of things that I use depends on what's in the fridge and what flavor profile I'm looking for, and then use the immersion blender to blend it. So you got to remember the immersion blender needs to sit on the bottom of the jar so that you're emulsifying the egg yolks and little bits of oil as it drizzles down underneath the egg yolks, and then you hold it there and you keep on going and slowly tilting the immersion blender if you need to, and that will allow the oil to drizzle up into the egg yolks and will emulsify as it goes along. If you do it too fast, your mayo will break. And then we served them tonight with some of the pickled coleslaw off the shelf, some of the apple barbecue sauce that we've had recently. There was a choice of some fish, which I had bought at my grocery haul. It was an everything bagel crumbed fish, or the pulled pork. Everyone had a bit of whatever they wanted, rolled up with the tortillas and eaten nice and warm. It was a lovely meal. It takes a fair bit of effort. I don't make it too often, but it was requested, so I made it. So that was everything for today. Tomorrow we need to mince all the pork up and get it all into the sausage casings, so I will bring you along for that as well. We also need to do a big day of wood cutting, so I'll have to share that too, because we're going to have to go and scout around and find wood and stack it all up, because we're having to cut wood every day or 2 at the moment, which is inconvenient, and we need to have a good couple of weeks worth stacked up so that we don't have to do that. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again next time.